Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, and welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. Lovely to have you back. Been a week since we last spoke. I hope you and yours are all well and enjoying your weekend. I've got three regulars on with me today to discuss what's been happening this week. And although there's not a great deal happening in Scotland, as unfortunately there hasn't been for a while, we've still got plenty to talk about. And I'm delighted to welcome Yvonne Ridley and Phil Boswell, of course. And I'm delighted, after a long absence, our Denise Findlay is back to join us this week as well. Welcome, my friends.
Hi.
Hi, Yvonne. Hi, Phil. Hi, Denise. Hey, we've got the gang back together again. How are you all?
Great.
Good. It's been, as I was saying there in the introduction, it's kind of quiet. There's some things in Scotland, but we're getting to that quiet period, but there's still plenty to talk about. I mean, this week, for example, Yvonne, we had a vote of no confidence in our wonderful Prime Minister, that bastion of truth, integrity and decency, Boris the Piffle Johnson. But it was a close run thing, was it not?
Well, I was wondering, there was this flurry of activity last week of MPs who joined in this very slow rebellion. And I wondered if they were acting under orders so that Boris could get it over and done with, win the vote, and then carry on regardless for the next 12 months without any more attempts by the 1922 committee to stop him in his tracks. So, he's still there, he's survived, and he's still putting through crazy policies and uninspired garbage. I mean, the farming stuff that he came out with that's been deliberately leaked. It's very uninspiring, and I'm just wondering if this whole confidence vote was if he was behind accelerating it and getting it out of the way.
Well, actually, on that, Phil, I think Yvonne brings up a very good point. We love a good wee conspiracy on here. You can't whack a good conspiracy theory. And I saw someone mention the fact that with the Wakefield by-election coming up on I think it's the 20th of this month, there's been a 20-odd% swing to Labour and the Tories are going to take a kicking. That some people said that, as Yvonne alluded to, that he probably wanted this out of the way because if the vote of no confidence came after, they took a beating in a by-election up there, that he could then maybe just lose the vote. So, good conspiracy or bad conspiracy?
I don't think you need to believe in any conspiracy theory to understand the simple fact that the powerful, the elite, the wealthy and the empowered act in their own interests at pretty much every opportunity. It doesn't need to be collusive. It's just simply doing what you always do. And having watched the Conservatives up close, they're organised, ruthless, and they whip very, very well. They knew the numbers. They know exactly the numbers. So what we should ask ourselves is, what was the intention of this? What's really behind it? And we don't really know. We wouldn't really know. But I fully expect this was a deliberate setup. One, to ensure that Boris does continue to take the rap for Brexit, him and his team. That's what they're there for. That's the prime function. They're not there to do anything sensible, because show me something they've done sensible. They're not really professional. But you also get the caring Conservative. Oh, we've got a conscience. We're not really too sure about Boris, but it just scrapes through, so we'll carry on regardless. No, it's a confidence trick. In my belief, this is gaming the people, and it's always set up that way. So I don't think you necessarily need to call it a conspiracy theory. I just believe that they are ruthless and they're trying. They need to keep Boris. Two, they're trying to show a softer side and that they care and they listen. But it's all nonsense.
Well, when you talk about Tories whipping it, paints up a completely different picture. In fact, I hear Tories pay a lot of money for that, but that's another story for another
Yep,
day.
I've heard that too.
Denise, as Phil was saying, you know, the policies are crazy. The one I feel absolute and utter shame about is I got a bit of hope during the week there when they said that the Rwanda flight had been hit with an injunction, but that injunction has now been lifted. And we are, whether we like it or not, and we're all responsible, we're people trafficking now to Africa. People who our country has helped bomb out their homes from Syria, Iraq, and all these people. We're now trafficking. It shames us all, does it not?
I'm not entirely surprised that the Conservatives wouldn't go this way, and I wouldn't be surprised they don't get support for it. This is to their base. And these are the people that voted for Brexit because they didn't like immigration. And they're going to be it's going to give the Tories support. That's why they're doing it. It plays to their base. And yes, they don't care about going against international law. So I assume this is against international law, but it's not something the Tories ever care about. But it's to shore up support in their base. That's why they're doing it. His other fantastic idea from Johnson of having benefit claimants buy their own houses, like they can't afford heating and they can't afford food, but they're going to be able to save up for a mortgage deposit. And the whole thing is ridiculous. And he comes up with ridiculous stuff and he lies all the time. Just lies. He just makes up statistics and just lies. And people are so used to him lying now. Like, you know, we've got the highest employment, or we've got the best growth, or we've got this, you know, the best space program. You know, who knows? Everything's got to be the best. He just makes it up as he goes along. So he lies all the time. He comes up with ridiculous policies like this benefit people buy, you know, okay, you can't afford food, but you can buy your own house. And then the violations of international law, and there are ways to do it again with Ireland, as well as the Rwanda flights, which are disgraceful. But it's what he does, and it's what the Tories are today. So will the English, because it's the English that predominantly vote for them, will the English put up with this and continue voting Tory when they get the next opportunity? And I'm afraid, being Scottish and in Scotland, I don't have a great insight, but nor do I have a great amount of confidence that the English won't keep voting Tory, despite what they do, because they voted for Thatcher, they voted for Brexit. I mean, you know, I have no confidence that they're not going to continue voting for him. But I don't think he will lead the Tories into the next election. What I think will happen is they'll completely destroy what they've got to watch. And I know they do everything for show, but I do think they're going to get rid of Johnson, because what they have to watch is their reputation in general. So, like I say, I'm not overconfident, but that, you know, that they won't get voted out next time, because what I think they'll do is, if they think they're going to get voted out and they think Johnson has become a liability, in that case, they will get rid, and they'll bring in like the opposite of Johnson. And they'll run that person in the next election. So I think that would be the plan. Their plan is to hang on to Johnson and try and figure out if he's an asset or a liability. And if they decide he's a liability, he will be gone. 12 months doesn't matter. They'll get rid. So that's why I would be expecting their calculation, asset or a liability in the election. That's the only calculation.
Yeah, it's things are getting steadily worse for people like myself and the left, everyone. I mean, although I was delighted, as I'm sure you were, and I'm sure it was very genuine to see Prince William on the streets of London selling The Big Issue. And what a coincidence! There was a whole load of the press happened to just bump into him somewhere, I don't know, in Kensington or Chelsea or wherever he was, selling The Big Issue. They really do treat us like mugs, do they not?
From my point of view, I've always been a Republican, so I've never supported the royal family, and I have no respect for them whatsoever. I just will put that out there. And as for Prince William and his stunt, yeah, really, just sell one of your palaces.
Well,
That
it's
was
terrible. What Yvonne, he apparently he quoted the Bible and got mixed up a wee bit when he was out there, and he said, "In my granny's house there are many mansions, and if it were not so, I would not sell you a big issue." I don't know if that's true or not. I'm starting the rumour.
I just thought the whole business was just so offensive. But, you know, the Queen is on her last legs, and they're all
Literally.
scrambling round now to try and show their relevancy. Prince Charles has waded in on the Rwanda controversy as well. He's saying, or his people have been briefing the media, saying that he's appalled at the Rwanda scheme. And of course, he did promise a few years ago that he would not politically meddle. So there's just this word game that's going on, and these royals who really are so last century and have absolutely no relevance today are desperately scrambling to do private briefings, to do silly stunts, and all of that. And while we're on the subject of the royals, I see that images of Nicola Sturgeon at the Platy-Jube that she attended in London has gone viral. But it pretty much sums up, she should have expected it anyway. If she was there, she was in the row behind the royals. And I just think that, it speaks volumes when you get political leaders doing this lick-spittle toady performance for the Queen,
I agree. Yeah, I said, and I'll say it again now, I accept that as First Minister of Scotland, there is a justification for going to St Paul's Cathedral. I accept that. Well, I don't like it. But going to the Jolly at night, absolutely no excuse, reason, or justification in that. But on the theme of things just going from bad to worse, Phil, I noticed this week as well that Sainsbury's have refused to pay the living wage, saying they can't afford it. However, they've got record profits, and the Sainsbury boss, I don't know how he's getting by on his 3.8 million per annum, telling us that he can't afford to pay his workers a living wage. It just kind of encapsulates the whole thing of everything that stinks in this union.
It does, and you can contrast it. I mean, going back to Yvonne's point, contrast what Nicola's been doing recently versus Alex Salmond waving a saltire at Wimbledon, and how the press came down heavy on him, and everything seems to be running quite smoothly with the press for Nicola. And is that something to do with is there any money involved in this? And when you look at how this greed continues, this is corporate greed, and I, as a capitalist, as you know, I was down in London getting my visa for my next job, which is an oil and gas job, and the money in that industry is obscene right now. The profits are obscene. You'll take it. I'll take it. Yeah, I'll take it, and I'll go and work away. I'm going to dangerous places, and there's an element of that as well. But it's not commensurate with the work. I mean, I come from the construction industry where, okay, it's a couple of levels below in terms of pay, but the work's exactly the same. So why is it that workers in Sainsbury's can't get a fair crack at the whip? Why is it we've gotten 5% for railway workers and everybody else has been told to tighten their belts? That's not right. I mean, this ties everything together with, what is England going to vote, as Denise was saying, because it's not Corbyn. It's not social. I want more socialism in our society because that's correct. That's the right balance for us. We should be fairer. We should be more open and transparent. And if we do get England changing the Conservatives, it's not going to change a difference because we're so Americanised now. It's just Starmer and a reinvention of New Labour. So what's the bloody point?
But, I mean, that's the point. I saw a lot of people saying, oh, well, the train drivers are highly paid. Well, good luck to the worker. If that's one set of workers, my argument is simple. It's not, oh, look what a nurse gets. Well, my answer is, well, what are you going to do? You reduce the train drivers' money? How about us increasing the nurses' money and the porters' money and the bin driver? Let's move it up. As I've often opined from here in Spain, they pay actually very good welfare payments here. They pay good money. And everyone joins it because they don't put their money into Panama. They spend it in the local community. Now, if you give it to the nurses and the porters and the bin men, you give them the money, they're going to spend it in your town, in your shops, increasing the tax take, creating new jobs to serve this market. I mean, you don't have to be a genius to work that out, but this continuous squeezing. On another thing, I was noticing at the this week, Denise, on the same day as Boris won the vote, very narrowly, on his vote of no confidence, Graham Brady, who is, of course, the chairman of the 1922 club who count the votes and carry out the vote, he'd been voicing considerable anger at the upgrading of the Scottish West Coast line to get some benefit. It was to working with HS2, and it would give us a link to the HS2, but it was going through his constituency and he didn't like it. And lo and behold, the same day as Boris wins the vote, they cancel the West Coast upgrade. Now, it's just a coincidence, is it not, Denise?
Yeah, well, they've been wheeling and dealing behind the scenes, no doubt, to get support. I'm sure he is. And I think one of the other Tories said that he'd voted for Boris because Boris had promised him money for his constituency. So obviously quite a bit of that was going on. It's called pork barrel in the US, isn't it? Where like they fund projects in the seats. So that's basically what he's been doing. But we knew HS2 wasn't going to be a benefit to Scotland. It's been another con. They always intended, I'm sure, to cancel this right from the start. It's a bit like, remember we were promised a direct train line to the continent during the whole Eurostar.
Yeah, the Eurotunnel, yeah.
Happened, yeah. Uh-huh. So it's just another thing I'm sure they always intended not to carry out. But this is really our problem, and it goes to what Phil was saying. Our problem is all our industries are owned by corporate interests. We don't have a stake in it. Our state, the Scottish independent state, would have been taking stakes in things like the wind power auction, which we sold off at rock bottom prices of complete and utter incompetence. Sometimes I think our government in Holyrood is deliberately bad, but in this case, I think they're just like completely incompetent. They sold it off at the wrong price. Our ports are owned by Canadian pension funds. What happened to our publicly owned energy company? So because we've no stakes in any of our resources, that's why we can't build the social democratic socialist country that we want, that Scotland would vote for. That's the tragedy of it. We would vote for a fair, equal society, but until we get control of our resources, and particularly our energy resources, we don't have the means, we don't have the power to do so, and we can only get that through independence. And we've got a government sat in Holyrood for 8 years doing absolutely nothing to protect Scotland from the Tories, from Brexit, to protect Scotland from economic harm, to protect our people. They have not lifted a finger. They've sat in their middle class comfort, raking in the money and their expenses and paying their mates to work in their office. And now it's a wee industry for them, and it's a lifestyle for them. And they're not interested at all in helping Scotland at all. They've not inspired.
What unites us, Yvonne, in this call and our viewers is this desire for Scottish independence. And Denise is right, there's not a lot been happening in the last 8 years. In fact, I found myself recently, this year, I've hardly written any blogs because there's nothing really new to write. We've just been marking time, waiting for something to happen. And now we hear Nicola Sturgeon turning around and saying, in this coming week, she's going to write, after 8 years, she's going to give us a blueprint for independence. A blueprint, Yvonne. I'm expecting to see a full Monty of all the policies, how we're going to get back into the EU, which is another question I'm coming to you with next, Phil, about how we do that. But it's ridiculous that we're getting a blueprint 8 years in and allegedly under a year away from a new referendum.
It's madness. We should have had a roadmap in place, which is constantly updated so that it's current, so that if, so that it within 24 hours notice, they can slap it down on the table and say, right, there it is. But it really is frustrating. It's depressing. But I do think that there is light at the end of the tunnel, because we cannot continually go on like this. We've had 8 years of what is becoming increasingly clear, absolutely no activity at all. Something will snap, something will break. And I'm confident that people in Scotland will rise up, and I think the SNP, in their arrogance, cannot see the storm brewing on the horizon, but it's coming, and I think it's going to happen this year.
Well, I hope you're right. Which brings me on to this point, Phil. We read earlier this week, and we know about Tim Rideout of the SNP, who put through a motion at your conference in, I think, 2019, where we would move to sterling, would move out of sterling into our own currency as quickly as possible. Now, two of the things that Nicola Sturgeon keeps talking about is, we will have independence, you will have a referendum, and we're going back into the EU. But she's also saying in the same breath that, and Ian Blackford reiterated it in Parliament last week, that they're going to keep sterling for the foreseeable future. Now, here's the fact, unless I'm mistaken, tell me, Phil, you cannot get back into the EU if you're using somebody else's currency who is not a member of the EU. That debars you from getting back into the EU. So how does Nicola tell us how we're going to get back into the EU using the pound sterling?
Well, she's not. We're not. SNP's not doing that, and that's what we need to reintroduce is listening to the people and letting the people speak on this subject, because I know many SNP members who not only are disenchanted and very unhappy with what the EU is doing right now, and I was a big EU supporter, but watching how they're behaving, the whole Russian-Ukraine debacle, and becoming another lapdog of the Americans, just like the Brits are. I know that we don't all think that the pound is the right way to go to continue with that, and I think the Scottish pound 100% is correct, but we need to have the debate. And just as I watched Alba have these kinds of discussions, and SNP used to have these discussions, we need to reintroduce that to the SNP and let the people speak. But looking at it from a project management perspective, I look at when Nicola said blueprint, I'm thinking blueprint. Blueprint in project management parlance, you go through the stages of a project. You've got appraise, select, define, execute, and operate, in different functions. And a blueprint is an order of magnitude estimate. It's a sketch of roughly where you think you might be going. That's a appraise stage. That's the first stage of the project. And this is 8 years down the line. Wake the hell up. That's just outrageous. We should be spitting the dummy out about this one, I'm afraid.
Denise, we all saw the interview with Nicola with the in-house magazine, The National.
Yes.
She was asked a very simple question about the referendum, and she was not a happy bunny. How dare you question me in the old head? We're getting that head shaking bit she does. It sort of told the tale, did it not?
Yeah, it's her lies are catching up with her, and now she's going to have to deliver, and she cannot deliver. And what upsets me is the amount of people that lie to you. Even Mike Russell was on Twitter basically lying, saying he's working through the 11-point plan. He hasn't started the 11-point plan. Go and read his 11-point plan. He's meant to put a bill through Parliament. He's meant to have requested a Section 30. He's meant to have a draft bill. None of that's been done. So he hasn't even started his plan. So everybody in the SNP knows that there can't be a referendum next year because of the timing, the timescales of actually setting one up. But we have to assume that they're going to come good and start the referendum campaign. And that's what we've been doing in Alba. So we've had our roadshow events, and we've got the Wee Alba book that is coherent and answers the questions. We will have our own currency. We will join EFTA. Both the EFTA resolution was passed by conference. The currency was done at National Assembly. We're also talking about their border, because there will have to be a border, but we have to look at the easiest, most seamless border between Scotland and England. And we can use the Irish border as an example. So really, there's the answers in the Alba book to these big questions, including a lot on the environment, on energy, loads on energy, and green environment credentials as well. So we've been doing roadshows and that's what we're going to continue doing. We're going to just campaign as if we're having a referendum next year, and hope that somewhere there is that secret plan we've been promised for a very long time. And at a certain point next year, the secret plan will be revealed, and with one bound, we will be free.
But I have a bridge to sell you, Denise. It's a very nice bridge.
My estimation is there will not be a independence referendum next year, but I am going to campaign as if there is one.
Yeah.
In case there is, but I don't have a high hopes of it. But there can't be any harm in campaigning for independence over the next year anyway, regardless. So we will be ready when opportunity, because what Yvonne was saying earlier is exactly correct. That's why we have the Wee Alba book. So when we get an opportunity to go for independence, we're like, here are the answers, and we can start the campaign tomorrow. If you ask me, can Alba start an independence campaign tomorrow, I would say yes, we can, because we already have the answers. So let's get it started. Let's do it tomorrow. Let's get a date. I
agree. Yvonne, I agree with Denise. I don't hold out much hope. As I said earlier, this year I'm about 90% down on writing articles, because there's nothing new to say. You can only say so many times, we need independence. You're not doing enough. Where's the preparation? So I don't actually do much, and it's only topical things that we cover on here. But we do need, it's getting to the critical stage, and if we don't do something, we're never going to get out of this union. And it seems to me that Nicola plays to a demographic that is never going to get us to independence. Because one of the things I heard this week was she was asked about land reform and said she didn't want to be known as a Scottish Mugabe, so she wouldn't do any land reform. The thing that her people and her party and her conference voted for. So does she try to appease more the people who don't want independence than the people who actually want independence, is my question to you.
Well, as Denise says, Alba is already in the starting blocks. We're ready to go. And I think that we've got to stop listening to the SNP. It's just too depressing anyway. They've got nothing new. They haven't got a box of tricks ready to roll out. I mean, the Constitution Secretary, Angus Robertson, what is the point of that man? What has he come out with? What has he said in the last 12 months? He's supposedly overseen the preparation of these papers that will set out the updated case for independence. We've set out the case for independence already. It's in our little wee Alba blue book. We're in the starting blocks. We're ready to go. And I think that many other organisations within Scotland, like the All Under One Banner people, I think everybody is geared up the person who's still dawdling around is the one who should be leading us. So I think we'll probably start without them.
Well, Phil, I'm sorry, so as the SNP man, you're taking a bit of a kick in here, as is our want. But there's a lot of truth in that. But Yvonne's right. There's other, like, all under one banner, but there's also SSRG and Salvo saying, well, look, if Nicola doesn't want to talk about alternatives to her Section 30 gold standard, which, let's be honest, it's not going to happen, the Section 30 gold standard, is it?
No, it's not, and what Yvonne and Denise are saying are correct, and particularly what Yvonne said about, or you mentioned yourself on land reform. What Nicola's was, what I don't want to be considered as a Mugabe. Who cares what people think about you? We're not interested in your legacy. Get his independence. It's not about you. And that's what people need to pick up on. I don't give a shit what people, sorry, but I don't care what people think about the leader. Do your job. Your job is to lead us and to take us into independence. And we see no signs of that. And so when you see people like like Salvo and like SSRG and Sarah and all the very talented and very specialist team there, it's a very dry subject. It's a very difficult subject, and a subject that's difficult to put over to people. And the claimer right is fascinating listening to these people like Sarah Salyers talk about it intelligently, passionately. They understand the ramifications of putting this together, of excavating this constitution as it stands and piecing it together again. But what I understand is, we got to establish it. We've got to substantiate what it is and piece it together. But critically, what's the mechanism by which we implement it? How do we go from having established this? What vehicles do we need to create? Do we need, as it seems to suggest from what Sarah's saying, a representation of the people, a second house in Scotland to carry this forward and push it and make it legal in Scotland? And how it's legally implemented is critical, because that's the excuse the SNP are currently giving for sticking with Section 30. And that has to be, I don't know how long it's going to take for the rest of my colleagues in SNP to wake up and understand that 2023 ain't happening. It's just not happening. And they're feeling around for an excuse just now. It's already too late. And the last thing we want, what I think would be the biggest betrayal, is if someone goes off half-cocked with this, they come up with some way to have a half-arsed effort at this, and that puts to bed independence for a consider. That's my biggest fear. Yeah. There's an element of I've kind of resigned myself to the fact that Nicola ain't going to do this. She's not. She's interested in Nicola as her. I don't want to be considered as a Mugabe, and other statements very clearly illustrate to me. But what I really fear is that by her compromised position that she's now in, if I've got three things on Nicola that could perhaps could normally destroy a political career, how many have MI5 got on her? 23. So as far as I'm concerned, no, not good enough. Move on, get out of there, and let's get somebody in there who's going to make it happen.
Denise, I saw a tweet sent to me by, I got to give him his name and give him a shout out, Ian McCord, who wrote a rather interesting one, and it's a question I couldn't answer, and I put it out to SSRG and Salvo, and he said, perhaps rather than simply walking out of Westminster, the tactic should be for the SNP MPs to write a formal letter of endorsement to Holyrood, transferring power to Edinburgh to hold a referendum, thus satisfying the symbolic reserved nature of Westminster in that area of the Constitution. And he said, what do you think of that? Well, I'm not a constitutional. So I sent it to Salvo and I sent it to SSRG, and they both said, this is actually a very good idea. It would, of course, be voted down in Westminster, but we need to be doing things like that to, push them and probe at them and show that we're not just sitting down taking it. I think it's a fabulous idea. What about you?
I don't think the political will has to be there, and Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP in Holyrood and in Westminster do not have the political will. That is our issue. There's a million things they could do if they had the political will, but they don't. They don't have the political will to protect Scotland. They don't have the political will to change and address the inequalities in Scotland. They don't have the political will to get us independence. We'll never get independence. They don't have the political will to do it. And Nicola Sturgeon just cares about Nicola Sturgeon. That's true. And I do believe that she's very compromised. There's no way any other First Minister could have went through the catalogue of disasters and stitch-ups that she has done and got away with it. She wouldn't be First Minister. She's getting away with it because she is helping the British state. And a First Minister that wants independence, the British state should hate. They should hate. And the British media should hate. As you know, we know how much they hate Alex Salmond, right?
Because they fear him.
Yeah, and I seen this. The Herald yesterday has one of the usual pictures of Nicola surrounded with children hugging them. You just have to look at the pictures of her in the papers. She is heavily protected by the British state because she's incredibly useful to them, and she will do what the British state tell her. And on the subject of what Phil says, which is also a fear of mine, I like a pretending wee referendum that has Devo Max on the ballot or just is set up to lose, because I sort of believe that happened in 2017. That was kind of set up to lose. So the only reason that won't happen is, I believe, is because of the groups, including Alba and now Scotland and other groups, because the British state can't be sure that these groups in Alex Salmond won't be able to galvanise the yes movement for a yes vote. They can't be sure. So as long as we are here, they probably won't go for that option, just because there's that slight bit of uncertainty. But that is our only protection for them doing something really evil, like running a referendum that they intend to lose.
Well, if they use the same franchise as 2014, they will.
Nothing past them. These are people that were willing to jail their former leader. That's the people we're dealing with. I don't put anything past them. Nothing past them.
You alluded earlier, Yvonne, that things are... There's a feeling growing of something's about to happen, something going to go down. I've said myself, I think there'll be riots in England, hunger riots before this summer's out. But as things are beginning to happen globally, which give me some cause for hope, smaller nations are starting to fight back against the big boys. I mean, we've seen it in the recent thing in America with the Conference of the Americas, where a lot of the American nations, where America tried to keep Cuba, Venezuela, Honduras out of it, and the president of Mexico, Bolivian affairs went, well, we're not coming. They're fighting back, things they wouldn't have done before. And the one that really pleased me was the Indian foreign minister was a conference, I believe, in Sweden or Switzerland, I'm not quite sure. And he was getting pulled up because India was still buying Russian oil. And he said, well, we didn't send our people out to buy Russian oil. We sent them out to buy a best deal for oil. And it just happened to be so that Russia discounting the oil price at $35 a barrel to India. So India, protecting India's interests, bought the oil from Russia, more oil than they normally do. And then the Americans arrived and said to India, you've got to stop this. And the outcome of it says, no. Europe thinks that their problems are the world's problems, but our problems are our own problems. Ukraine's not our problem. Russia's not our problem. And the long and short of it is that India is now buying this oil from Russia, sticking the $35 back on it and selling it to America. The we nations are, when I say we, not geographically or numerically, but India telling America and the European Union to get on their bike, it's encouraging, and it shows us as Scots that we can step up to the plate, surely.
Well, I think that the order of things is, or the established order of things is crumbling now. And state collusion, dirty tricks, they're all beginning to surface. And it's like the old saying, fool me once, my fault, fool me once, I forgot what it is now, but you know what I mean. And it's I think people are beginning to wake up. I mean, we're living in a world where, you know, the left-wing journalist Paul Mason, who, you know, I thought was a working class hero, has turned out to be far from it. He's been actively siding with the British establishment, calling for state repression against those who have opposed Western imperialism. So if somebody like Paul Mason can be turned, you know, Nicola Sturgeon can't be trusted. And I think that there is a tsunami coming of people who will rise up, take the baton for independence, snatch it out of Nicola Sturgeon's hand, and just charge ahead with it. And you know, you mentioned the SSRG group who are working tirelessly behind the scenes. Lots of groups like that are out there and are ready to surface. And when they do, I think that public opinion will be so overwhelming, there'll be a huge wave forward. As I say, Alba Party is already in the starting blocks, ready to go. And I'm sure that, you know, there is going to be this almighty shake up and wake up for the SNP later this year. And I think that they will probably be swept along with it because, you know, we're only going in one direction. And those who oppose it will be swept aside.
I hope you're right, Yvonne. I mean, these things happen in small chunks. I've often used the analogy of the Berlin Wall, Phil. It wasn't two guys sitting in the pub on a Friday night in Berlin said, let's take down the wall. There've been all sorts of things happening between, you know, the Polish Pope, the Gdansk and the ship, and all sorts of things going on that led to this happening. And there's been things happening throughout the world in the UK that are going on. There's two things I'd like to bring to you as an oil and gas man. And one of them was that because the sanctions aren't working very well, Janet Yeltsin, who's the US Treasury lady, she decided to form a cartel of all the NATO countries and the EU and went to the Russians and said, we'll take your oil because we need it, but we're not willing to pay more than this price, so take it or leave it. And the Russians said, we'll leave it because they found you, which I thought was very amusing. But the other one that came out this week in the press was that the UK at the moment is exporting 3 billion litres of petrol and components to make the fuel to America. And the Americans, who are paying the highest price at the pump ever, but are still paying 60% less at the pump than we are in the UK, and particularly in Scotland, energy-rich Scotland, people can't, you know, it's costing us more for our food because delivering the food. All these wee bits surely are going to eventually set the people off, and we can get on with our independence.
It's very complicated. People are not being told by the media what's actually happening. That's the biggest problem. So getting the message out there. But I mean, the crux of it comes to having a power monopoly previously with America, and everyone kowtowing to America and doing what America wants, like what you said, the 3 billion litres to the US to help America when we're struggling, our people are struggling. What the hell are we helping the Americans for? You know, and what I love about Jai Shankar, obviously I've just spent 4 years in India building stuff, and what the Indians are doing is, what sickens me, is good and it's bad at the same time. What we're doing is creating more millionaires in India. The $35. India is now important. It used to be 30,000 barrels a day. It's up to 800,000 barrels a day. Now, anybody, if you understand how arbitrage works, when you buy and sell commodities, that's perfectly acceptable. But when it's a fixed market like this, when it's a falsely imposed market where sanctions are creating this is theft. This is corruption. This is legalized corruption. And who's paying for it? Again, we're not just paying for the arms that are being allegedly sent out, the money put aside for arms. In the front door is paying for arms, out the back door into bank accounts offshore, as you mentioned earlier, Roddy. The same with oil. Why are we paying these rates? I mean, the influence of a cartel that you were talking about, it's not so smart. The Americans have really played this very badly with Russia, the economic side of it. For example, OPEC. The OPEC basket was one of the strongest oil prices. It's up at 123 just now. One of the most expensive oils, always one of the blends, Brent, our oil, Scottish oil, 96.5% of which sit in Scottish waters, and almost all future finds will be in Scottish waters off the west coast. That's sitting at 122. West Texas intermediates sitting about 120. You know, we've got one of the best oils, and what kind of idiot thinks they can tell Russia what price it can do when its markets are expanding out, not just through the banking system, but its ties with China? We're pushing more people into this duopoly. And thankfully, we have a choice now, because when America was running the show, it was taking advantage of everything, bullying everyone, romping around the world, telling people what to do, what they're doing in the Solomon Islands. Don't do that. We don't like it. What are you talking about? It's how it was 7,000 miles away. Sling your hook, America. You know, it really needs to wind its neck in a wee bit. And I don't say that, I'm not critical of the Americans, because I've said America represents what was the best of us and what we aspire to, you know, in a civilization. But it's let us down. It really needs to get back on track and stop being a bully. And we need to stop playing these power games and enriching the billionaires and the wealthy, and start getting a wee bit more socialism and a wee bit more fairness, transparency.
But what I want to see, Denise, is us telling England to wind their neck back in again.
Aye.
And I want to know what will be the final part. You know, will it be the oil price, where we're paying so much we can't drive our car, we can't get to work, we can't pay our mortgage? What will it be? What's the final thing that the people of Scotland will say enough, and it will force the government to do something?
Yeah, the trouble is we have, as I say again, a leadership that is not fighting and has not fought for 8 years. If you look at when they brought in the internal market bill, that was a time to fight. Mm-hmm. Straight after the Brexit vote was a time to fight, was a time to say we are not leaving the EU and dig our heels in and then go for independence at that point. There's been many, many opportunities to fight, but instead of fighting, the government just goes along with things. And the problem you've got, if the people don't see their leaders caring, if the leadership aren't saying, hold on, why is HS2 cancelled? Why are we piping all our energy down to the northeast? Why is carbon capture? No fight whatsoever. None of them ever stand up and fight. They don't fight. They concentrate on personalities. All they talk about, the only thing Ian Blackford likes to do when he's down in Westminster is have a go at Boris Johnson and get some easy little clips for social media. That's not a fight. That's not fighting. They should be fighting for Scotland, and they haven't fought for Scotland for 8 years. So as long as the government is passive and not fighting, it's hard to see the people. You know, we need to organise the people, because the government isn't going to help us. It's not going to be our government. And that's the saddest thing. Because when we had a Scottish government, when we got a Scottish government, when the SNP came in 2007, there was this expectation that they really were looking out for Scotland and protecting Scotland. And the problem we have now is the people think that the SNP government are looking out for them, and they aren't. They aren't looking out for Scotland at all. They aren't. They're looking out for themselves and their own power for its own sake. So we need to organise the people. Yeah. It won't come from the Scottish government. They haven't got the fight.
You're absolutely right. Denise, Yvonne, Denise is absolutely right. And that's why people like us, people like SSRG, Salvo, all under one banner, now Scotland, the people watching this show, the people, you know, reading all the pro-independence blogs, they're the people that can force the issue and make the SNP government suddenly understand, wait a minute, we have to get into this scrap, otherwise we're getting left behind. It's going to have to be people-led, is it not?
It will be people-led. I mean, we are heading towards a perfect storm. Nicola has been shielded to a certain extent by that buffoon in 10 Downing Street, and you know, he's been a useful idiot in terms of a major distraction. But back home, back in Scotland, if you really put the country under the spotlight, the health service is failing badly. We had a story of a woman who needed to see a heart surgeon, and she was given a date in 2024. These sort of stories are emerging all the time. There is a perfect storm gathering over the rail networks. You mentioned the RMT. The RMT is a brilliant union. Why? Because it has weathered the storm of Thatcherism. It has remained united. It's been very strong, and it doesn't take any prisoners. It's for its members, and it won't be derailed, to use a deliberate pun, in its mission for its members. So this trade unions are now beginning to see the strength in unity once again. And as I say, this perfect storm is starting. I like to think that the Alba party is in the eye of the storm. We've done the work that the Scottish government should have done. We've got the SSRG people there who are, as Phil said, dealing with all the non-sexy, crusty constitutional issues that are way beyond a lot of people's thinking. And this perfect storm is coming, and I'm quite confident that this it will be people led, and if the people start to lead, then the leaders have to follow, or they will become irrelevant.
Yeah, that is my hope. My biggest hope would be to get more time, but there never is. The clock is always beats us, and it has done again. And a couple of things. I'd like to thank you all, of course, for being here today and helping us out, and giving us your wisdom. And it's always a joy to have you here. And for you watching, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have, talking to my buddies here. But over the coming months in summer, SSRG and Salvo, who we've named a few times today, are holding conferences and groupings. They need support. They can't do it on their own, and you have to look out for it. And I will make sure there's a link down below where you can register for their conferences. One in Dunfermline, and I'm terribly sorry, sir, I've forgotten where Sarah's is. No, I can't remember. That's terrible. Okay. Falkirk, there you go. I was thinking Falkirk, I wasn't sure. Falkirk, and these are coming up. We've got to back them up and support them to get things going. And right after this, we are having the old historian himself, Roger Anderson, is doing a nice bit, and I've got to say it's the Tarbert Peninsula and the history of the stones of the grave plots. Now, there's some more Scottish history we're going to give you every week, so that you can catch up, because the disgrace is, among the other things that have been done to colonise us, is we've not been taught our history. And Prism, in its own wee way, will try and rectify that. And so every week we'll have a wee clip of Roger doing something else. So I want you to enjoy that. I hope you enjoyed this. And we've got another couple of episodes before we close down for the summer recess. And so until I see you all again, please take care.
Good afternoon. I'm some miles away from where I was last week, and I'm about 1,000 years earlier, coming up for 1,000 years or so earlier. I'm sitting in a lovely spot overlooking the sea, just above a village near Tain called Shandwick, and next to me there's a Pictish cross slab, which I'll show you in a moment, that dates back around about to the year 780 to 800. So we're talking, 1,200 years. So a fair stretch of time. there's a couple of reasons why I came here. Last week I was pretty sort of straight up and onto the subject, the place that I was in, partly because I was recovering from COVID at the time, as you might have guessed from my voice. So I didn't really introduce the sort of full scope of what we're doing here, or what I'm doing here, with these little 10-minute or however long they last talks. Really, I'm looking to ask a few questions about our received history, if we've even been taught history at all here in Scotland. Quite often we've had very little, or if we have had some, a lot of it's been British stroke English history. There's a number of reasons for that, some of which I'm sure you can guess, so I don't need to point at them and shout certain words, but we've had a history which possibly quite often isn't our own, or our own has been subsumed by other histories. And in a sense, this place is an example of that, but not necessarily for the reasons that you think. We know very little about the Picts, certainly from historical sources. We're talking about a period that's euphemistically known as the Dark Ages, what is known as the Dark Ages, and part of that name is the implication that it's all dark. There's not much historical information, as opposed to earlier periods like the Romans. But then, of course, the Romans didn't actually settle most of Scotland, did they? So when we talk about the Romans, it's the history of a 40-year period just north of Hadrian's Wall, running up to just north of Glasgow, the Antonine Wall. Beyond that, there were what the Romans called barbarians, what they eventually came to call the Picti, but initially they seem to have called them the Caledonians. And the Picti are the Picts. We don't even know if the Picts called themselves that name or by that name. Possibly they did later on, but what the Romans were describing at the time were probably tribal peoples. But by the time we get the great monuments like the one I haven't shown you yet that I'm sitting next to, we're talking about a people who are moving in the direction of forming kingdoms, or have formed kingdoms. I'm actually sitting in what would have been probably the Pictish kingdom of Fortriu. You might not have heard that, but that's actually the core of what became Alba, the kingdom of Scotland. That is the core. Where I am sitting I'm sitting above, as I said, the village of Shandwick. Its name actually comes from Norse Sandvig. There are a number of Norse names around here. This is east of Ross. That's a sign that the Norse actually settled in this area. But I'm looking across the water here towards Burghead and the Murray coast. That remained Pictish. So this is really the core of Pict land. According to a quick search on Google, and you'll get a date of 843 for the formation of Scotland. Might quibble with that, but let's kind of go with that vaguely. What we get generally are generalizations. The Kingdom of Scotland doesn't stabilise for another couple of centuries in reality, and we've been told, if we were told anything about the Picts, that the Picts were conquered by the Gaels, the people of the Kingdom of Dalriata in the west. Most historians, most modern commentators question that and look at it from a completely different perspective now. In fact, the fact that the Picts, Pictish culture, the Pictish language, apart from in place names, disappears has probably got a lot more to do with the fact that the the Pictish kingdom, the core Pictish kingdoms, had a lot of refugees, basically, from areas, including the west of Scotland, which had been Dalriata, which were being subsumed by what we call the Vikings. So a lot of the history we've had in the past has come from certain perspectives, and that's one of the reasons why our history is kind of distorted. The perspective it was coming from was really an early 20th century, late 19th century perspective, and that's a colonial perspective. So those guys looked at the history of Scotland, big gaps in the history of Scotland, big gaps in the historical record, and I'll mention why that is, and they came up with the idea that peoples were getting conquered. Why? Because they were going around the world conquering people. It's fairly obvious, isn't it? What were they doing? They were building an empire. In actual fact, we're talking about cultural assimilation. We're talking about cultural mixing, and one of the reasons for the kingdom, the Pictland, at its core, Fortriu here, this area, or just south of here, and the kingdoms of the Gaels amalgamated was because of the Viking threat, because of the threat coming from places like Scandinavia, Norway. So we have a kind of different history, a different view now. But if you go back 1,000 years, if you go back 1,200 years, this would have been the very heart of that core kingdom that became Alba, and gradually adopted the Pictish language, died out, and it gradually adopted Gaelic. Anyway, let's have a little look around. So I'm going to change the perspective on this camera here, so that you can see the view and you can see the stone. I'm going to come back to these, and I'm going to talk more about these. But I wanted to say something about how history becomes distorted. History is always a matter of debate. You're taught in school quite often, especially if you're of a certain age, that history is done and dusted. These are the facts about history. There are very few facts apart from dates. A lot of the time, what they call revisionist history, what they call, attempts to destroy our British history. The British government get very annoyed about statues and things like that. People quibbling about statues. That's a version of history, and it's a contested version of history. It's all contested. It's all a matter of evidence. It's all a matter of perspective, and we need to realise that, because different things affect our view of history and our acceptance of certain things, and those include, if you like, foreign influence. Those include colonial influences. Those include imperial influences. It's seen most clearly in Jacobite history, but it's seen right throughout Scottish history as well. Anyway, let's shift this round. Let's see if I can do it seamlessly. Oh, well, that wasn't too bad, was it? Right, so here is the view in front of me. There's the sea. You can possibly spot the Murray coastline leading over to Burghead. That was a very, very important site. If you ever go to Burghead, look for the remains of the Pictish settlement there. Pictish fort, massive site. Down into Aberdeenshire, very important sites down there. A lot of these are there are archaeological digs at the moment. And if I pan round, there we are. Okay, it's in a protective casing, this particular stone, but if I walk round, you can see a massive, hopefully you can see a massive cross. It's not too many reflections, and a number of symbols around about it. By this point, the Pictish kingdoms were Christian. They were Christianized around about 594, 595. We know that from Celtic monks, Columba in particular. His base was Iona. And we can see Pictish symbols, animals. Again, I haven't got enough time to go into the symbolism of this, but These are biblical stories they're showing on this side. And then if we go around the back, the other side I should say, of this stone, we've got a Pictish beast. We've got intricate patterns, some of them influenced by, clearly by Gaelic, Celtic art, Irish art, books like the Book of Kells, Book of Deer, and illuminated manuscripts basically, and also Northumbrian, because of course the areas which we now know as southern Scotland were actually, they were not part of, they were actually part of a British kingdom to the south of here, but the Northumbrian Christian church was quite influential at points. So you can see the stone there, hopefully you can see some detail. It's unfortunate, well, it's good, but it's also unfortunate that I'm looking through this through glass at this, because the problem is that it's kind of difficult to make some of it out, or at least it looks to me as I'm videoing this that it's difficult to make out. But hopefully you're getting a sense of this. There's some signage here as well, giving a little explanation of some of which I'd actually quibble with, because since this signage has been put in, a number of views about the Picts have changed in the light of extensive evidence. And if we look around, you can see the hills inland, hills and mountains, back down to the sea. Beautiful spot, beautiful spot. And there's a number of these stones in this area. And in the last few years, there's also been the discovery, I'll turn this around again. Sorry about that, you're back to me. There's also been the discovery of, or a site has been excavated at Port Mahomack, which has turned out, I won't give the full story of that, because I'll cover that sometime. It's turned out to be basically the eastern equivalent of Iona, a Pictish Iona, and a stone carving centre as well. There were stone carving centres across the water there, at near Beghead at Canada as well. There are great Pictish cross slabs across the water there as well. They're all over Scotland, but these later ones are indicative of the formation of certain centres of religion, power, and so on and so forth. Anyway, Canada's across the way. I know about that one actually because a number of my ancestors are buried there, going back to the 1600s. So Canada has a place in my in my heart or something. But yeah, I want to come back to this idea, you know, that our history is affected by the period it's written in. Our history is affected by the evidence we have, and that's really problematic in Scottish history. I'll just quickly say why. The reason why it's problematic in Scottish history is because a lot of our records have been destroyed. Why have our records been destroyed? Who destroyed them? Edward I and Cromwell. Okay, you know about the first one, right? He's the bad guy in Braveheart. Enough said about Braveheart. I could say quite a few things about Braveheart, but yeah, he's a bad guy in Braveheart. English king, invades Scotland, William Wallace, and more on that anon. And then of course Robert the Bruce, Bannockburn, didum. And that was Edward II actually who got beaten there. But so records were destroyed, records were taken, and then we've got Cromwell. Now, a lot of you might not know this, but Cromwell invaded Scotland. Cromwell invaded Scotland and brutally imposed his will on Scotland. He did what he did in Ireland. In Ireland, he said, "Oh, they're Catholics." In Scotland, he wasn't. He was doing that to Presbyterians. So this idea that Catholics v Protestants, nope. That's later. That's very much later, and that's something that's overlaid onto Scottish Jacobitism as well. And it doesn't actually fit. It might fit other places, but it doesn't actually fit. Cromwell, General Monk, invades Scotland, for example. Dundee, they wipe out a third of the population, as I recall. And they took our records. They took our records down to incorporate us into the English Republic, the English Commonwealth, and they took our records. Closed, no Parliament, direct rule from England. I mean, proper, full on. No pretense like 1707. Proper, full on direct rule. And the records were down in London. On the Restoration, they were returned, but there was a storm, and one of the ships sank, and a substantial number of records were lost. So we've got big gaps. So what we know about the Picts, going back to the Picts, is really it's coming from two or three main sources. One is Irish. It's the Irish Chronicles. It's the Irish monks who were coming here to convert Pictland, fellow Celtic peoples. The other is the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, and the Anglo-Saxons were, they had a few disagreements with the Picts, a few battles, Nethismere, others, and biased. The word. You're talking about your enemies, the people who you're fighting, who are actually writing about you quite, for a substantial part of that period. So Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, and there's also a manuscript which gives a list of the Pictish kings, so we can work out something from the Pictish kings. But if we take one, I mean, the famous one is Kenneth MacAlpine, who is viewed as being the king who united Pictland and Dalriata, all the lands of the Gaels, into the kingdom of Alba. Now that's actually not all that clear, and also his origins are not all that clear. His mother was probably a Pictish princess. He, to what extent he was Pictish and to what extent he was a Gael, is difficult to ascertain, and it's one of those things that, again, you can argue about. So, we've got a lot of contested history. It is in this period generally, but I guess our running theme with this is going to be that it's not just this period, and there are some gaps that I've pointed to. It's not just this period that's contested. It's actually the substantial part of Scottish history, and that runs right up to the Jacobites and beyond. Republican movements in the late 18th century, early 19th century, 1820 rising, armed rising, what happened? All of these things were either not taught, they were ignored. Someone else wrote our history, and someone else kind of lost bits of it as well. So we're piecing it back together. If you're interested in the Picts, a couple of things I'll say. You might want to look up the Northern Picts project online. There's some interesting stuff. Gordon Noble has written a really good book from it's based at Aberdeen University. They're doing a lot of great excavations. Gordon Noble has written a really good book, The King in the North, about Fortriu. It's very interesting because for a long time it was presumed that Fortescue was further south, and that the important part of the Pictish kingdoms was to the south. Now that's a bias, that's a southern bias that comes about post Culloden in Scottish history. 50% of the population of Scotland was north of the line you could draw across from the Loch Lomond across to the east, the bulk of which was the Highlands. These days, obviously, most people are in the Central Belt. That wasn't the case back then. So there was an early presumption that the important part of the Pictish kingdoms would be to the south of here, far to the south. They weren't. Scotland was much more evenly distributed. If anything, these lands, the lands I'm looking onto, Moray, were the safe area. They were not subject throughout most of Scottish history to English invasion and the destruction that was meted out to other areas of Scotland. So, we've got a completely different perspective. We've got a different geographical perspective. It all changes at Culloden. There's this massive boulder that's dropped into a pool, and the ripples come out and have been affecting us ever since. But it's quite interesting going back over 1,000 years to explore that. So I'll be doing some more of these. Anyway, I think I've talked enough. So thanks for watching.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism.